Hello, I'm Elin Rosmayati from PBI 1A, University of Kuningan, and I'm gonna tell about my ebook reviews that I have read. The title of the book is Jane Eyre. The author is Charlotte Bronte, published on 2015, page 50. For the first one is chronological. The story is about an orphan girl named Jane Eyre who lives at Gateshead Hall with her aunt and cousin, but her life is not happy while living with them. Then Jane is sent to Lowood School after a fight with her boy cousin. She hoped her life would be happier away from them, but that was wrong. Jane faced many problems after that, especially after meeting a widower who had one daughter. The name is Mr. Edward Rochester. Jane was Adele's governess. She is Mr. Rochester's daughter in Thornfield Hall. Everything went well at first, but it became a sad thing when Jane and Mr. Rochester fell in love and decided to get married. On their wedding day, a surprising thing happened. Suddenly, a lawyer came and said that this marriage should not have happened because Mr. Rochester had a wife named Bertha Mason, and Mr. Rochester confirmed that fact and told the truth that his wife was a madwoman. For the second one is compare and contrast. For the compare, at the time Jane realized that she was falling in love with Mr. Rochester. Then she couldn't sleep well because she kept thinking about him. After that, the next day, Mr. Rochester went to an event in Ingram Park and was attended by many beautiful women. And Jane heard that. Jane was jealous and started comparing herself with other girl. Jane said, like, "You are not pretty and you are poor. Mr. Rochester will never marry you. He will marry Miss Blanche Ingram. She is a rich lady. You are a poor governess. Forget Mr. Rochester, Jane Eyre. Forget him." Okay, for the contrast is Jane is a student at Lowood School. Lowood School was in an unhealthy place. The buildings were wet and cold. Mr. Brookhouse owned the school. He was a rich man, but he didn't buy warm clothes for us, and he didn't buy good food for us. Everybody hated him. And the next year, Lowood School moved to be a better place. It was a healthier place. There were new school rooms, new bedrooms, and a new dining room. The new buildings were bright and clean. The teachers were happy, and Jane was happy at Lowood School too, at the new school too. For the third one is order of importance. This is tells that no matter how our family treats us, whether it's bad or not, family is still family. Like Jane learns Jane heard that her aunt, Mrs. Reed, is terminally ill. She puts aside her anger towards the woman and goes to care for her. Mrs. Reed confesses on her that bad that she was worse to Jane than previously thought, revealing that Jane's paternal uncle has asked Jane to live with him and be his heir, but Mrs. Reed told her that Jane was dead. So no matter how our family treat us, whether it's bad or not, family is still family. And the fourth one is sequence. Jen and Mr. Rochester find Mr. Mason. One of the FYI is Mr. Mason is one of the guests who came to stay for 2 weeks to Thornfield Hall, which is it's the home of Mr. Rochester. Mr. Mason was sitting on a chair in the room. His face was pale and his shirt was covered with blood. Then Mr. Rochester left the room and told to Jan that I'm going to bring a doctor. So Mr. Rochester told to Jan to stay with Mr. Mason's arm, but don't speak to him. And after 2 hours, Mr. Rochester returned. The doctor was with him. The doctor looked at Mr. Mason's arm. The doctor put a bandage on Mr. Mason's arm. Mr. Rochester put Mr. Mason's coat around the injured man's shoulders. Then he spoke to me again. "Run downstairs, Jane. Unlock the small door at the side of the house," he said. "Well, we will follow you." And then Jane quickly downstairs and opened the door. Outside the door, a servant was waiting with a carriage. Mr. Mason and the doctor came out of the house. For the fifth is special. In the 1830s in northern England, at Gateshead Hall and at Lowood School, at Thornfield Hall and at Moor House. For the sixth is cause and effect. For the first one is cause. Jane and Mr. Rochester fell in love with each other. Then they decided to get married. But on their wedding day, suddenly from the end of the dark room came two men, a lawyer. He was named Mr. Briggs and Mr. Richard Mason. They said a surprising fact. A lawyer said that Mr. Rochester were married in the West Indies, and his wife's name is Bertha Mason. She's alive. She lives at Thornfield Hall. And Richard Mason said Bertha Mason is his sister, and he said, I saw her at Thornfield Hall in April. And Mr. Chester's face was pale. For a minute he was silent, then he spoke quietly. Mr. Chester said, It's true. My wife is living at Thornfield Hall. She is mad. Come to the house, all of you. Come and see Mrs. Rochester. Come and see the mad woman." And for the effect is because of the events on the wedding day, which should have made Jane happy. At last, she decided to leave Thornfield Hall, leaving Mr. Rochester's behind. And quickly she went into her room, put some clothes into a bag. Later, she heard Mr. Chester go into his room. Very quietly, Jane went downstairs. She opened the small door at the side of the house and left Thornfield Hall and walked to the road. For the seventh one is problem and solution. For the problem is John Eyre is a Jane Eyre's dead uncle. John gives Jane a letter, but the letter is secretly hidden by her aunt. In the letter, John said that Jane would get all of her £20,000 money. John didn't give money to his other nieces and nephews, only to Jane. And the solution, when John left Thornfield Hall, she went without direction and until she stops at a house to try and ask the owner for help. And unexpected happened. The house consisted of 3 people. It searched John, Diana, and Mary and surprisingly, the owner of the house is John Eyre's nieces. Their mother is John's sister, and Mary, and because they were John's nieces, Jane gave them the money that John had given her, as much as £5,000 each. So that's all for me. Sorry for my mistakes and thank you.